Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dutchman's. In this episode I'm going to be talking about something that you can do to help your perennial trees and shrubs to make it through the winter. And so personally what I do is I apply wood ashes, which has potassium and phosphorus in it. Potassium helps the water and nutrients to get throughout your tree and the roots and everything else, helps the transport of all these things. And the phosphorus helps with good root growth. Generally though, in the research of this video, I did find that there's a study done by Washington State University that actually found that generally in an urban landscaping setting, people apply too much phosphorus, which can run off into the waterways and can cause problems like algae blooms in nearby lakes or streams or anything like that. And it's also been found that it's generally a nitrogen problem in those situations and not so much a phosphorus problem. But I'll link to the article in the description below to read it for yourself. I'm container growing right now, so it is more likely that there is a deficiency in something than if you were to grow in ground. In ground you have obviously a lot more soil and a lot more room for these roots to grow and everything, that it's more likely that they're going to be having everything that they need. And so applying a lot of fertilizer isn't always necessary. I only apply a little bit of these wood ashes just to make sure that it's there, but I do this on top of mulching heavily and having that breakdown happen naturally. So a little bit goes a long way. I get my wood ashes from my barbecue. I like to barbecue whenever I can, and in that process you only want to use lump charcoal. You don't want to use any starter blocks or liquid starter or anything chemical when you're doing this, because obviously all of that stuff is going to end up in your soil and you just don't want to do that. You want to avoid that. That also means no briquettes, because there's a lot of chemicals added to it to keep it all together. With that said, let's go apply a little bit to the surface of the soil. Alright, so here we are at one of the bigger pots. And you might be wondering how often you have to do this. And realistically, you only have to do this once in autumn and once in spring. That's really the most you'd have to do this, because more than likely your regular fertilizer is already going to have a little bit of potassium and phosphorus in it. So you really don't have to apply more than that. And also you don't have to apply a whole lot. So for a good container this size, I really only add about a tablespoon per container. So it's really not a whole lot. You don't want to overdo it. A little bit goes a long way for sure. So start with that. This is probably more like a heaping teaspoon, so I might have to add a little bit more. Just like that. That's what it looks like. Sifted. There might be there's some particles of charcoal still in there, but for the most part it's all pretty fine. Even if you had a little bit of charcoal in there, it's not a big deal. So you just kind of go around and sprinkle it all on, just like you would really any fertilizer. You might see a chopped up plant in here as well. I had a couple what I think are pumpkins coming up in here, which I was going to let them grow initially, but then I decided to just pull them up. So there, that about does it. That's pretty good. See my little propagation project right here. This quinault. So from here, you want to make sure that you water it in. Don't want it to fly away in the wind. Just like that. I'm also expecting rains next week, which will further help watering it in. Alright, I'll show you one more example just so you get another idea of it. So the other ones I want to do this to are all these lemons, limes, and even my jalapenos. Even though my jalapenos for sure will be coming in, the citrus will stay outside. It's also another good reason to do this to these guys is because they're flowering and producing fruit pretty heavily. So they're definitely potassium and phosphorus hungry at this point. So that's another reason to do it. You know, for production things. But has a bit of a multi-purpose reason there. So again, we're just gonna sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle. Right on top. You might not want to do this to things like blueberries because they obviously like acidic soil and this is alkaline. So you probably could do it to this. To them, you just would have to make sure that there's something acidic that goes right after it to kind of balance that out. Also, in step fertilizer packets that you'll see in big box stores and things, you usually see that the late season fertilizers are always very heavy in potassium and phosphorus, and that's not for nothing. That's because, you know, it's the root growth and fruit and flower production and all of that stuff. That's a pretty good reason why these things are so high in potassium and phosphorus a lot of the times. But you don't have to buy it in the store, but you can. If you don't have a way to acquire this, maybe you don't barbecue, or maybe you don't have a fire pit or anything like that, maybe you just don't have that available, you don't do that, then you could certainly buy it in the store as well. It's just that I have this on hand. I have this readily available. It's essentially a waste product to me that's given purpose, which is always awesome when that happens. We'll do this to all of them. Whoa, it's a windy day. Alright, so now we're just going to water them all in. That was it for this episode. I hope that gave you a better understanding of how the potassium and phosphorus works and why they added so much to late season fertilizers. So, with that said, I hope you consider subscribing, and we'll see you in the next one. Tot de volgende keer.